Are you a real estate investor and you're thinking about building an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit? And maybe you're thinking, if I build this, how much value is it going to add to my property? Then make sure to tune in today where I interview an expert in the appraisal field. I'm Juan, our president of Sage Real Estate. And we're going to dive deep into how is it that our appraisers are instructed to evaluate that property and what is it going to do to your value? How much more is it worth? Hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, I'm sitting down today with a good friend of mine, an expert in the appraisal field, Marcus Espinoza. Marcus, you've been appraising for 22 years now. You're a commercial appraiser. You've got more designations than I know what to do with. I mean, you're an MAI, a CCIM, ASA, and a SRA. Tell us a little bit about you, your background when it comes to commercial appraising.
Well, like you said, I've been doing this for 22 years. I first started my career doing single family 2 to 4s. I did that for about 7 years, and thereafter I stepped into the commercial world doing complicated properties, and so retail, office, industrial, special purpose properties such as dealerships and groves over in the Central Valley. Churches.
So we have a tremendous expert with us today, and so we're excited to hop into this. Tell us, Marcus, a little bit of the firms that you've worked for in the past. Some of the big names that the folks might be familiar with.
Colliers International, CBRE. I've also worked for litigation firms. Different litigation firms, smaller boutique firms, but yeah, the big ones would probably be CBRE and Colliers International.
Got it. So we're going to hop right into this, Marcus, because a lot of people have been asking us questions when it comes to ADUs. Now, just so you know, we've done videos, we've covered the ADUs, how they're being built, the cost of building them. But the one issue we keep having is ADUs and the new value. What is the new value of these? And so I'm going to take it from the top. It's one of the hottest topics, ADUs. Why is there so much confusion when it comes to evaluating or giving ADUs value?
Good question. Thank you. I think it's mostly due to the lack of data. When I say lack of data, ADUs are new to the appraisal world, and because of that, there's not a lot of data such as sales comparables. And when I say sales comparables, I don't mean sales, I mean comparables. And there's a difference between the two. Comparables is something that a buyer considers as a substitute in buying the subject property. So there's not a lot of good amount of data out there. And for that reason, it does cause confusion. And so when we don't have that data available, we have to look at alternatives in valuing that property type.
So what Marcus is talking about is when you're an appraiser and you're looking at a building that you're appraising, and now granted what Marcus gets hired for are commercial properties. So sometimes it's, it could be a hospital, it could be a mall, it could be a golf course, it could be these difficult projects, but oftentimes he will do multifamily, 5 units and above. And so sometimes he's hired to appraise a property that might be, say, an 8-unit building and it has 2 ADUs. In a perfect world, he should be comparing it to an 8-unit building with 2 ADUs, but what he's saying, lack of comparables, is there may not be another 8-unit building with 2 ADUs that sold in the proximity and in the time frame that they require them to use. And so that's what he's talking about. And for that reason, there's confusion.
How do you define a ADU? And part of it is, okay, so you got the local, you got the state, you have Fannie, you have Freddie. They all define it differently. And because of that, there's certain ways that you need to value. So as an appraiser, we'll look at the appraisal problem. That's our first step. Mm-hmm. And so the correct thing appraisers should do is after they get engaged to doing an appraisal with an ADU, they should contact the lender and say, hey, listen, where is this going? Is this going to FHA? Is it going to VA? Is it going to FHA? Where is it going? So if it's going to Fannie, it's going to be handled one way. If it's going to Freddie, well, Freddie and Fannie, they kind of talk to each other. There's a few differences, but they're mostly talking to each other. The major difference between Freddie and Fannie is Freddie says, okay, Fannie says, we accept an appraisal as a single family with the ADU, but they do not land on 2, 3 unit dwellings because that's frankly, that's what they land on. Freddie, on the other hand, they actually will land on 2 units with an ADU, 3 units with an ADU. They will not land on a 4 unit with an ADU because now you're bridging over to the commercial world. When you're bridging over the commercial world, now that would be viewed as a 5-unit apartment building.
Got it. Well, I'm glad you explained that because we've had a few meetup groups here at the office, and we did this whole panel of ADU experts, and some of the questions we were getting was, I built this ADU and for some reason the appraiser is not giving me credit. But the one thing that we didn't know, and I didn't know, that, hey, it depends on where your lender is going to take it. So I'm glad that you said that there's 2 separate. There's Fannie, there's Freddie, and the lender and the appraiser, it needs to go to the right entity to be able to get the right loan on it. So thank you for covering that. One of the questions that we get is, do they allow the income to be considered from this new ADU?
Yes. Okay, so as of today, Fannie does not consider income, but Freddie does. There is some nuances when you're appraising for Freddie. They do have some requirements. They want to see at least one comparable ADU within the survey, but Freddie does.
So it seems to me, and this is what I want our viewers to, if you're in a situation where you've built the ADU, you're thinking about selling, or maybe you're looking to buy one, it seems to me that I would talk to the lender and say, can we do what we can to go with Freddie? Because I just watched this video and Fannie's not going to make this loan be possible with this ADU. Because a lot of times, Marcus, I'll tell you this, and I think you know this, buyers are counting on that income to be given credit to be able to get the loan, right? And so I think if we know that Fannie is going to be the one that says, hey, we're not in that business of doing that, they could save time by taking it to Freddie.
Right.
Because I'll tell you this, appraisers not appraisers, a lender may not always know this because ADUs, like you said, are so new.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. But what I think is happening is, as more and more people are doing ADUs, and I get it, accessory dwelling units outside of California may not be a big thing. In California it is. Why? Well, because we needed housing, and so state laws were changed that really incentivized people to build these units, and owners are building them at this high frequent pace because they know that they're going to make money off of that from the rental and from the appreciation from the asset. So it makes sense to do it. And so again, in Southern California, very, very popular. They lease up quickly. In fact, they lease out for the same amount, right, Marcus?
Right.
Like no one says it's an ADU, therefore I want to pay less.
Right.
Okay. How many ADUs can one build on a single family property?
Okay.
What are you seeing out there?
So Freddie and Fannie are in agreement in this, and they say you only can build one.
And so now, okay, so that's Freddie. So this is where Freddie and Fannie are wanting you to build one, but city codes are now allowing you to build sometimes 3 to 4 on a single family homes. This is with zoning of one house. Right. So although the planning, the building and safety department is allowing you to build more, you're telling us that from an appraisal perspective, from a lending perspective, you may not get credit for those additional units outside of the 2?
That's correct.
Okay.
The appraiser just won't be any good because you won't be able to take that to Freddie or Fannie.
Okay.
But I'm not saying that it's not lendable. I mean, you can take this to other lenders. This is just Freddie and Fannie, and getting the benefits that Freddie and Fannie offer, I mean, that's off the table.
Yeah. So traditionally, that's where you would want to take your loan. I mean, of course, there's always alternative financing. Okay. And alternative financing simply means much more expensive financing, but it's there for you. So in this scenario, if I'm an investor and I'm going to build 4 because the city said I could because we don't have enough housing, great. But just know that you might have issues when you're trying to resell and they may not be giving you credit. And although a lot of people blame the individual appraiser for the appraiser doesn't understand, it doesn't mean that they don't understand, right? It means that there's guidelines that they need to go by,
Right.
either input by the Appraisal Institute or by the lending community. Marcus, because more and more ADUs are being built, and it seems to be like right now, all of my clients, if they want to add value, they're building ADUs. It's the obvious, it's the easiest thing to do. Do you believe that at the Appraisal Institute level, Fannie and Freddie, do you believe that they're going to amend some of these kind of rigid requirements to I mean, is that going to change in the future?
Well, the income clause with Fannie is in discussions right now, and I believe that it's going to change.
Okay.
But it's in discussions, and that's not what's current. But yeah, it's in discussions, so they're looking at changes.
Talk to me about determining highest and best use when we're looking at a duplex, because that's something that we come across, and sometimes clients are asking us like, should I do this? Should I not? What are the benefits? Give us your expert opinion.
Okay, so when you're looking at a single family dwelling and you're adding ADU, question arises is it a duplex? And in some cases, the answer is yes, in other cases are no. And that's when that becomes a highest and best use question. And under the highest and best use, you have legally permissible. What legal and permissible means basically is you need to go down to the city to figure out what can you do there. And so in some cases, in some municipalities, they say, if you're going to put an ADU in our area, there needs to be an owner user on site.
Okay.
And so if there's an owner user on site, that means it eliminates one of the dwellings or the primary dwelling, which is a larger dwelling, the inability to make income. So therefore, it's not a duplex. It's a single family with an ADU. So that's from the zoning standpoint, and that's under highest and best use. In the highest and best use, we also have to identify who is the likely buyer. And a lot of times it's clear, and in some cases it's not clear. Like in a higher density area, I would say that it is unclear. I've seen where people are buying a primary residence with an ADU, and they're living in one. They're letting family live in the other, or the owner user's there and they're renting the other piece. And then maybe it's like 50-50. So then another case you have where there is they're renting it out, and then when they're renting it out, in that case it would be a duplex.
Got it. I always thought, kind of an interesting thing, Marcus, how, and you tell me if I'm wrong, the way that I see it, when someone has a single family home, they build an ADU, the way that the lender looks at it doesn't call it a duplex, that the lender says it's a single family home with an ADU.
Right.
Is that what you're seeing as well?
In certain cases, yes. I mean, it comes down to who your buyer is. So if your buyer is for example, my wife and I are looking into putting an ADU in our backyard.
Okay.
And what is our intent? What is our motivation? So our motivation is, I have kids. I want my kids to have a place to stay, and I want my in-laws to have a place to stay. And down the line, I'm not going to be, in my 40s anymore. I'm going to be in my 80s, and I'm going to need a caregiver. So if I have a caregiver, where am I going to place that caregiver? So I think I'm going to place that caregiver within that dwelling. So that's my motivation. And you have motivations like that. And because of that, it's a single family and it's a dwelling. So it's like, who is your likely buyer is who identifies that. It's the market. The market, and the likely buyer is the market. So in some cases it's a duplex, and in other cases it just isn't. It's a single family, and that just goes through with what's in the area, what kind of data's in the area, who bought this comparable, who bought that, yeah. So
Okay. Well, it seems to me that if I was lucky enough to have you as my appraiser, you would be understanding, because it seems like some appraisers just may not give it the credit that the buyer needs, and they're probably not looking at the area. That's that's my opinion. But Marcus, talk to us about 2 and 4 units involving ADUs.
Okay. So with Freddie and Fannie again, Fannie does not. They do not allow. They will not lend on a duplex that has an ADU. They will not lend on a triplex that has an ADU. Freddie Mac will lend on a duplex and a triplex. So that's kind of more or less what, the 2 and when you're going to 4, then 4, you put an ADU, it becomes commercial.
Let's talk about that, because there's, and this is where I want people to understand that there's real estate brokers, there's investors, there's lenders, there's appraisers, there's a lot of people involved in this, and I think that everyone's going to give a different answer. Now, when it comes to what happens when you have a legal 4-unit building and you add an ADU, Marcus, the way that I've been told is that it's not a 5-plex, that it's a 4-unit building with an ADU, and therefore still qualifies for 4-unit financing.
Right.
What are you seeing?
That's not Freddie Mac.
That's not Freddie Mac.
That's not.
What is that?
That's the other lending institutes.
Okay, so that's okay. That's what you're saying.
Financing, yes.
You're saying that under Freddie Mac, they're going to call it, whether they call it a 5-unit or a 4+ ADU, you're saying it's no longer protected by them.
Right.
Because one of the things that I was telling some of our investors, that if you have a 4-unit building and if you build an ADU, it doesn't go into commercial financing. I thought that it would be beneficial to own a 4-unit building with an ADU. That means you're getting that additional income, but you still protected by the permanent financing of 30 years, and so you're probably better off. That's the way I thought it was going to work.
Right.
And you're saying that we know definitely Fannie's not going to do it just yet,
Yeah.
and Freddie was my last option, and you're saying they're not going to do it either.
Right.
Okay, so there you have it. So if you have a 4-unit building, you're thinking about adding a 5th, when you go to sell, because at that point you might have at that point you're going to have a Fannie or Freddie loan on it. You're going to build the ADU. Nothing changes for you at that moment, right?
Right.
It's when you go to sell. And you might think, well, the next person should be able to get the easier 4-unit loan. And you're saying that you've now changed it on who could potentially buy that building.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, but there's a lot of other lenders that would lend on it in that manner, but it's just not Freddie.
And when he's again, other lenders, they're going to line up, and lenders, there's a lot of them, but there's going to be a fee behind it. So again, if you're in that situation, or if this is going to be new to a lot of people, and I'll be honest, it's new to me too, reach out to me. Let's have that conversation, because maybe depending on what your intentions are on ownership, it may not be the best thing for you. It may not be the highest and best use to add an ADU to a 4-plex. So make sure you guys reach out to us if you're in our area. Marcus, let's talk about the requirements of ADUs when it comes to lenders. Okay. What are they telling you, or how does that work when what they're telling the appraisers?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So one of the requirements, other requirements is, we need to, as appraisers, we need to establish marketability, and we also need to support a value adjustment. There should not be anything subjective about either one of those. Marketability, it's easy to determine. I mean, the demand, is there a demand? If you go to, let's say, Rolling Hills Estates and no one's building ADUs, and you go to the city, no one's building ADUs, there's no market there for that. If you go to Long Beach and you go to the planning department and you say, okay, well, there's, a wait list for it. That means that there's a high demand for it. So there you have established marketability for an ADU in the city of Long Beach, but not in Rolling Hills. And again, Rolling Hills, that's just an example. So then you could, the gold standard really is comparables. Is there comparables out there? And they're sometimes not available, but comparables determine marketability. But if you can't get that, going to the city is, it's a little extra work for us appraisers, and but that's it goes with the territory. Supporting a value adjustment. Well, the gold standard is sales comparables.
So let me give my input in this situation. There's a lot of investors out there that are looking at adding ADUs and now are thinking resale value. That's their added value. That's how they're going to flip the property. And my advice to you off of what I'm hearing from Marcus right now is, before you go to do that, it's to your benefit to make sure that someone has done something similar in that area recently, that an appraiser is going to look at that and say, that's my comparable. Now, you need more than one comparable, but at least one comparable is a start. Because if you're the first one to do it in your area and there's no comparables, you might run into a problem where it may not appraise for that buyer.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden your value and the profit that you were counting on goes away, and then you're blaming that specific appraiser. Marcus, what are your thoughts when someone says, oh, that appraiser doesn't understand it, let me get another appraiser? Is that a good idea? Like, does that change anything, or do they all gotta play by the same rules?
Well, they should be playing by all the same rules, and in some cases that's not the case. But us appraisers we have to be competent when we're valuing the assets that we're appraising. If you don't have competency, then you need to go out and get competency. That's kind of like the benefit for me, where I work for two of the largest firms, is that there's always competency around, and I can go out and grab it. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Okay, Marcus, thank you for that. Talk to us about what happens if I'm an investor and I want to build this ADU because I know that that's going to add value, and there's no comparables. Like, what do you do when there's no ADU comparable? Like, what's the next step for you?
Okay, so when there's no comparables, and that's not unlikely, I'm thinking of 3 techniques right now. Number 1 is match pair analysis. That's the gold standard when there is no comparables. So what match pair analysis will we do is we look at a sale that's a sale, not a comparable, but a sale, and we say, okay, well, that one has an ADU, and for whatever reason, it's not a comparable. So we look at that, and we look at other sales that do not have the ADU, and we determine what. I actually just did one, and the match pair analysis, the number ranged between $125,000 to $200,000, somewhere in there, for an adjustment, for an ADU adjustment. The other technique that I'm thinking of is the cost approach. And I know appraisers always say cost doesn't always equal value, but cost minus depreciation does equal value.
Okay.
And with that being said, that is another avenue of determining what an appropriate adjustment would be. Lastly, market participant interviews. Like someone like Juan, he just sold 5 buildings and they had ADUs. I pick up the phone and say, hey, Juan, I understand that you just sold 5 buildings with ADUs. What was in the buyer's head when they were trying to figure out the added ADU? Did they give full value for it? What was in their heads? And I talked to Juan, I talked to John Smith, and then I develop a range there. And then so there's 3 different avenues that you can pick up. So in a lot of cases, I just do all 3. Yeah, that's how we handle that.
When an appraiser gets an assignment and it has a house with a junior ADU, mm-hmm. Is a junior ADU like worth less than a regular detached ADU? Like, how does an appraiser look at that? Because that is a question that comes up. Juan, do I build a junior ADU, or will my value go up if it's a detached?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So standard ADU versus a junior ADU. Well, restrictions. So you just chose the route that has restrictions, and that restriction is you must have an owner user on site with a junior ADU or JADU. So the JADU, now the ADU may require an owner user, but in a lot of cases it does not. So if it does not, the more restrictive the use, in general, the less valuable it is.
So what Marcus is saying is that if you're considering a ADU versus a junior ADU, what Marcus is saying is, what is your intention by doing that? If you're going to live in it forever and you're going to hold it on for the next 15, 20 years, it's probably okay to do a junior ADU because you're not looking to profit from that portion. Now, I don't know if there's anyone monitoring after you build a junior ADU that you're selling it specifically to an owner user. In fact, probably no one cares at that point, but I understand that going into it, that's what you've told the city. But if there's restrictions, you would see how if there's restrictions in the way that you use that junior ADU, that would be worth less. And so that should answer a few questions out there versus what you should be doing. Again, if reach out to us specifically if this is what you're thinking before you even do it. A lot of folks out there are converting garages into dwellings, and it's becoming an ADU. Sometimes it's attached to the house, sometimes it's detached. Talk to us about, is it worth losing the parking to build a unit? What are your thoughts? What does the appraisal community think about that?
Yeah, and that has to do more with math. I mean, you are going to lose parking. So if you lose parking, you're going to lose an adjustment. And so you lose that adjustment, but you gain an adjustment. And it's a more of substantial adjustment. So I think it has to do with more, how much is there street parking? It's a rent thing. So some people will pay a premium in an area where there's no parking. I mean, if you talk about Newport Beach, a block away from the beach, I mean, parking is heaven. Those are things to consider. So there's always something to consider. Yeah, you lose some value because there's no parking, but you gain a lot more value when you have an ADU.
So Marcus, when he uses the word adjustment, it's a very popular word that they use in the world of appraisal, and it just means that when you're comparing two properties, and if you have to make an adjustment, that you've decided that either this other comparable is better in a certain way or it's inferior, and therefore they give that a monetary adjustment. So what he's talking about is when you're taking away parking from a property, you're going to lose some level of income. And let's just say that maybe in Long Beach, that's $200 of income. So that's an adjustment downward, but now you're going to increase it up because maybe that new ADU, if it's a one bedroom, should rent out for say $2,000. And so an appraiser has to balance that out. There's going to be more income made versus the loss. And so that's one of the considerations that you're referring to. Let's talk about commercial loans. Let's talk about ADU valuations. And that's more your wheelhouse. I know that's more, I know that you're appraising buildings out there where a lot of developers, that's what they're doing, right?
Right.
So I guess so that we learn from these other successful, what are you seeing that's working out there when it comes to buying 5+ units and building ADUs? Like talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, first off, commercial and residential, it's interesting because usually when you're appraising a single family home or 2 to 4, it's pretty straightforward. Commercial, you're dealing with so many different moving parts, and it becomes more complicated. But in this scenario, it's the opposite. When you're appraising a commercial property, let's say a 15-unit apartment building, they added 2 ADUs. That's just adding another unit. The property is just a 17-unit apartment building, and you just move forward on that. It doesn't take any brain. It's no brain power. You're moving right along. But in the residential world, it is it's completely. You have to know who you're dealing with and how you're going to deal with it and all the support that's required there's more moving parts on that end. But as far as what I'm seeing, you know, I would say about maybe 6 months ago, people were buying apartments and adding ADUs and you know, 12-unit apartment buildings, taking over garage conversions, putting townhomes in the back of them. So I have seen that, and it does add value. It adds value above what they're doing, what they're contributing to the improvements.
Marcus, talk to us about value. Now, when it comes to garage conversions, building ADUs behind multifamily, larger multifamily, what cost are you seeing and what value add are you seeing? Like how much money are they, from an appraisal perspective, obviously, what are you seeing? Like how much are they spending? How much are they getting back for that?
And a lot of work that I've done is in rent controlled area where people specialize out there, and because they specialize out there, they know how to talk to the tenants, they know how to get them out and remove them. So they're doing a lot of things outside of the ADUs, but they're also doing ADUs. So they're relocating, they're renovating, and they're adding ADUs. And so they buy a property, I don't know, I'm just making this number up, $100,000, a ridiculously low number, $100,000, and they put maybe that's too small of numbers, but yeah, they're spending about I would say about $200 a door for an ADU.
Okay.
That's
and when they're done, what's it worth for that door?
It's bringing in more than what they contribute, because and the reason why we do that, because when we're doing commercial loans, we're doing different valuation scenarios. We're doing an as-is valuation scenario. We're doing a valuation when it's complete and when it's stabilized. So we're doing three different data values. And when we're dealing with potentially just two, because complete could be stabilized because there may be a wait list, but between 2 and 3. And so that you can see the significant difference in value when you're doing the conversions.
Because I would tell you this, Marcus, if you're telling me that you're seeing, call them experienced investors, anyone who's doing this at this level has done a lot of them. They're familiar with the cities that they're working in. If it's costing me $200,000 to build, but I mean, in Long Beach alone, the average price per door is $280,000, and that's average. Imagine if you're above average,
right.
You know. So, to give you an example, if it's costing me $200,000 to create this new dwelling, it might be worth $80,000 more above my cost. Right. And so then I would think that I would want to do as many as possible.
Yes, and you're comparing, the 280 is a depreciated building, a depreciated unit, and then your ADU is a newly constructed unit. So it would go beyond the 280, I would think. I mean,
if you're working with a knowledgeable appraiser who seems to understand, and obviously you do because you're building them. So I would imagine that if a lot of appraisers maybe had your mindset of the true value of these ADUs, there might be less issues. But are you seeing appraisal issues at the 5+ units, or are you not hearing that from the people that you're working with?
Do I see
evaluation problems and issues in 5+ units?
Yeah, no.
No, okay.
Because there's less confusion. That comes back to your original question. So yeah, it's less confusion because, you know, the 15 to the 17, it's a no-brainer. Whereas you're dealing with residential, there's just so many moving parts.
Now, Marcus, just so that our viewers understand, I mean, you are a commercial appraiser. So then there's residential appraisers, right?
Yes.
And so that's where the difference is that maybe the residential appraiser only does the smaller stuff, you're dealing with the bigger stuff. And so if you have 5+ units and you're in that world, the only people involved in your appraisal reports are commercial appraisers, right?
Right.
For the most part?
For the most part.
Okay.
So yeah, one of the things I can think that's challenging for residential appraisers, they're not picking up the phone and they're getting better, but they're not picking up the phone and speaking with market participants. On the commercial side, it's like you're always doing them. So and when you're talking to these market participant brokers and buyers and sellers, they will make you think, and the appraiser think, the residential appraiser think, well, you know what, why am I, 3 brokers are saying an appropriate adjustment would be $200,000 for an ADU. Why am I using, I've seen in some cases where they're using 30. So it's just like, why am I, so it makes them think, but because they're not picking up that phone or they haven't took the appropriate class, I mean, just, yeah, so even if you didn't take the appropriate class, the market participant calls would help.
Got it. If a homeowner wants to get the highest return on an ADU, how should they go about building it?
If you, like I said earlier, it's really based on intent. So what is your intent? Is your intent is use, like the example that I gave earlier regarding my wife, my in-laws, and my kids? Is that your value? Is that, if that's what your value is, then that's what you'll do. But also, if you're on the investor side, if you're looking at a 1-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom versus a 3-bedroom versus a 4-bedroom, what should I build? I think the question comes down to you talking to your contractor and saying, hey, what is it going to cost to build a 1-bedroom? What is it going to cost to do a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom? So you do that, you get a number, and once you get that number, I will do a rent survey and see, okay, so what am I going to get for a 1-bedroom, a 4-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, whatever. And then you can develop a rate of return based off that. You could also do a payback. I would do a payback period. How long is it going to take me to get my money back? So that's the way I would analyze that.
Marcus, if some of our viewers out there are about to sell a property with an ADU, like what can they, and they're worried about the appraisal because they've watched this video and they understand that, hey, if it's 4 and under, it might be tough. Yeah. What can someone do to prepare for the day that the appraiser gets there? Like what recommendations would you have?
Well, before that's even set up, I would contact the lender in writing and say, I want to ensure that the appraiser that's coming out has taken the appropriate classes, have the correct competency to do this assignment, because it is complicated. And so with that being said, that would put a fire under the AMC and say, okay, I gotta go see my supervisor. Hey, Mr. Supervisor, who should we engage? I got this in writing. Oh, okay. So now the antenna's up and it's going to be handled appropriately. Once the appraiser gets there, I would, because I'm in the business, I would have some market participant interviews written out. I'll call local brokers in the area. I have them written out, put their phone numbers in it, give it to the appraiser. If there's any comparables in the area, I will give that to them. If you know of anybody that's doing, like if you know somebody like Juan that can get you cost comparables, things like that will be helpful to the appraiser. Yeah.
So I would say this, obviously Marcus does this all the time for his reports, and he has a tremendous team, and I've seen the amount of research that they do when they're appraising a property. They have no problem getting on the phone and asking the experts. And that's what Marcus is asking you to do. If you care that much to get the right value, to make sure that you're making that profit, and you took the risk, you should. It's going to take a little more homework, but you guys could do it. They could pick up the phone. And when he talks about market participants, these are brokers, these are investors, maybe find where there was a sale that did not pop up. You could do some of the research to prepare for that. Otherwise, sometimes you may risk not getting the right value, having to come in with a lower value, and all of a sudden you're having to negotiate again. One of the questions that came in, Marcus, from our viewers, we had let them know that this interview was coming up, and again, thank you for your time. Someone wanted to know have you ever seen where the ADU does not add value? Is there such a thing?
Okay, so I have not seen that, but is it possible? Yes. And I'm trying to think of the best way to handle that question. Eureka, Canada. So you build a pool in Eureka, and it's chilly out there, cold. It's one of the coldest places on earth. So if you build a pool out there, is it going to add value to that property? It will not add any value to the property. There needs to be a markability component to it. And if there's no markability component, like the example I gave for Rolling Hills, and again, that was just, I had no research on that, that's a situation where you have functional obsolescence, and that functional obsolescence there will be, yeah.
Got it. Got it. One of the other questions we got is, hey, Juan, if I build this ADU, will my property taxes go up?
Okay.
What advice do we have in that scenario?
Yes, so that leads to an appeal, but so the assessor is going to look at the cost of construction, and they're going to go with that. Even though your ADU, let's say, suffers from functional obsolescence, they're not going to go with that, and that gives you the opportunity to appeal it and hire an appraiser to demonstrate that. And then when it goes for resale or sale, they're going to go with sales price.
Yeah. Okay. Talk to us if there's vacant land. It's a single family home zoning, right? So it's just meant for one. And we're looking at doing new construction. Do you recommend that we do a single family home with an ADU? Would that be the highest and best use?
Yeah, that's definitely a highest and best use question. So you have an R1 lot and you're allowed to put an ADU on site. So you're building a house and you're going to put an ADU there. Okay. That's actually quite simple. So if it's going to cost, let's say, I mean, the guys are already there, right? So if it's going to cost an extra $100,000 to build it, I mean, the ground is open. It might, I think you're going to pick up some economies there, because it's probably not going to cost the same it was a cost as an existing building. You have concrete that needs to be broken into. You have to add sewers. Everything's open. So I guess I would say likely, yes. But then again, it comes back to a marketability situation. Does the market warrant it? So you look at the costs, contribution costs, and you look to see if it adds any value. Do the same thing. Is there demand? Is there any? You can order an appraiser and order an appraisal and get a prospective value upon completion valuation, and that will tell you the answer.
So I highly recommend you do that. If you're someone who's looking into building an ADU, there's nothing wrong with hiring someone like Marcus, getting his professional opinion. And when he talks about as is value, he's going to say this is what it is, the way that it is. If you add, so what they call the as built, they'll give you a value for that. So you would know from an appraisal standpoint where you stand. Now, the value that the market might give you for that additional ADU might be different, but at the end of the day, in order for that buyer to buy that property, you have to go through the appraiser. So again, there's always market demand and they will assign it a value. But again, an appraiser needs to do their research and they want to hang their hat on hopefully a comparable. So Marcus, that is the last of my questions. I thank you so much for your time and professionalism. So there you have it. Our interview with Marcus Espinoza, expert in the appraisal field, tons of experience. He's seen it all. So he gets the opportunity to view what investors are doing. Are they adding ADUs to single family homes? Are they doing garage conversions? Are they buying multi-units and converting garages? So what were my takeaways? It always makes sense to build an ADU. Now, if you're going to build an ADU, make sure that you look around and what are other people with similar properties doing. If you're looking to sell quickly, it's important that there are sales comparables, because if there's not, you're going to be the first one. And we all know that if you're the pioneer, you might get stuck with the lower appraisal value. So make sure you do some homework. Again, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, any suggestions of new videos you want me to cover, please send a message. That's all for now.